Resume recording. All right, let's dive in. So as we get started, just a little bit of connection with each other. If you could drop your name, your organization, or who you're with. If you're an individual, we welcome that as well. And in the spirit of our theme today around mental health, one thing that brings you joy on a hard day. I would say mine would be sunshine and a boat ride. That's going to be my one thing that brings me joy. Brenna, your puppers always bring joy on a hard day. Ice cream on a cold day. Okay, Emily, is it even on cold days? Because I support that, if so.
Even on cold days.
Even on cold days. There is no bad day for an ice cream. Sierra says she has 5 cats. A banana pudding milkshake. So specific. Did not even know they had that. I love these answers. Keep them coming in the chat and continue to connect. I'll move into our agenda for the day. So we're going to dive straight into a short legislative update and what's happening. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of observances around Minority Health Month, as well as School Lunch Hero Day that is coming up. And then we'll dive into our main event, which is a panel discussion with Mina and Josh to talk about the connection between food insecurity and student well-being. And then we will finish up with some coalition and partner sharing and dive into our next steps and what's to come. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so at the legislature, what's going on? So the General Assembly reconvened yesterday after a break. I read this morning that there were 55 bills introduced yesterday on the first day. In addition to the General Assembly reconvening yesterday, the governor also released his budget. And we were super excited and grateful to see that he included universal breakfast in that budget again this year in the same structure as he had it in last year. We're really grateful for that, but we're also mindful that his budget that he puts forth is a recommendation to the General Assembly. They don't have to take up anything that he puts in it, though we're hopeful. We're expecting to see a couple of things coming from the General Assembly pretty quickly around Medicaid and some of the HR1 stuff. But we're hearing some indication around another budget bill coming out closer to the end of June. So because we are the only state left that does not have a state budget, there are some things that are still on the table for us and that we're thinking about for our school meals coalition. And those are the things that were in the House budget, the $2.5 million for the farm to school funding. And that will be used for school nutrition programs to purchase locally, as well as some technical assistance pieces for school nutrition programs, as well as having some flexibility in the language for the meal incentive program that has been implemented for the last year or so, a little bit more. So the goal is to have a little bit more flexibility in that language of the program so that more districts are able to apply and we can maximize the amount of folks that are able to get onto CEP without financially putting their programs at risk. So we're working hard to get those things pushed through. We're also closely following some of the SNAP funding to ensure that NC continues to participate in SNAP. We know that SNAP is going to connect to the eligibility of those that are able to get no-cost school meals through CEP. So we're watching that closely. If you're interested in kind of seeing what was in the governor's budget around all education things, Ben Humphreys with EdNC put together a really great article around that. And Katie, would you mind dropping that link in the chat for folks? And we will
Sure thing.
be able to share that. And we'll be sure to include that in our follow-up email as well. Any questions around that before we move forward? Okay, and I'd like to pass it to Kayla and Tiara to talk a little bit about National Minority Health Month.
Okay, hello, everyone. Good morning. Uh, we are really excited to speak with you today about National Minority Health Month. As Alicia said, my name is Kayla Holland, and the Center for Black Health and Equity is one of the Schools for All North Carolina leadership team organizations. Really happy to speak on this topic today because this month, Schools for All joins the nation in observing National Minority Health Month. And when we come together in events and Schools for All meetings like these, it really helps advance our coalition mission. And not only that, it also reinforces that food insecurity is a fundamental pillar of health equity. So my colleague Tiara and I are going to share a few words with you all in honor of National Minority Health Month. And without further ado, Tiara, I will pass it to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Tiara Anderson, and I'm with the Center for Black Health and Equity as well. Through our work to reduce food insecurity across North Carolina, we're also addressing the systemic barriers that disproportionately affect the health and nutrition of minority students and families. As we do this work, we can't ignore the health gaps in our communities, whether it's a Hmong family in Hickory or a Lumbee family in Robeson County, the reality is the same. Structural barriers continue to limit access to nutritious food. That's why equity-centered policies like a School Meals for All policy in North Carolina that will eliminate the application hurdle will create a solution that meets students where they are at school. And I'll pass it back to you, Kayla.
Awesome. So all that to say that we cannot ignore the data. As we observe National Minority Health Month this month, it's important to continue to ground the work in data as we do for all of our School Meals for All North Carolina efforts. And a couple of the statistics that you see on the screen really help us to convey the health gaps that we're seeing as it relates to minority health. So in North Carolina, in our minority heavy counties like Halifax and tribal communities like Robeson, child food insecurity rates often exceed 30%, and that's compared to the state average of 17%. So really puts into perspective the disparities that we see as it relates to food insecurity. And then in that middle of the slide here, you see that about 16% of North Carolina census tracts are classified as food deserts, and a lot of those are in rural and minority heavy parts of the state, eastern and western North Carolina um, regions. So we wanted to highlight that as well as the reality that in North Carolina, Black children are nearly 3 times more likely to live in food insecure households than their white peers. And Latinx students are close to 3 times more likely as well. So the statistics that you see on the screen are really important for us to highlight during this month, especially. And we say all that to say that as we advocate for school meals for all in North Carolina, we're not just advocating for feeding kids, we're also helping to close a racial health gap that has existed for decades. So we wanted to close with a slight call to action for anyone joining us for the first time. If you haven't already committed to joining the coalition, please join us in advancing equity through access. Please help us to advance this work and formally join the coalition. On the School Meals for All website, it's schoolmealsforallnc.org/join us. And if you are already a committed coalition member, ambassador, champion, or organizational partner, thank you. We cannot do this work without you. And we just ask that you keep showing up and keep supporting School Meals for All to help bring more momentum to this really important effort. All right, passing it back to you, Alicia.
Thanks for sharing that. And kudos to y'all for continuing like nothing happened when my screen share changed. So
Notice that.
I didn't want to fix it while y'all were chatting. So allow me to fix that back.
All good. Notice that, and we are really appreciative of you sharing your screen, Alicia. Thank you all for being here, and really excited to continue to celebrate the other um, observances that are taking place this month.
Yep. All right, Andrew, tell us about School Lunch Hero Day.
Alicia, I'm also appreciative of you sharing your screen because it can be an oddly overwhelming task
Andrew.
sometimes. Uh, I'm Andrew. Along with you, I'm part of the School Meals for All Coalition. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about School Lunch Hero Day, which is coming up on May 1st. And it's a great chance to celebrate school nutrition staff who are serving meals, which I think is one of our most important jobs to highlight and show off the work they're doing. And we want you to celebrate with us. The School Nutrition Association helps put on this event and has a lot of cool materials like social media resources or things to print out and celebrate with in your cafeterias. So we encourage you to check that out. I think someone will drop a link directly to that. Please, if you're sharing on social media in your school or your district about School Lunch Hero Day, make sure to tag School Meals for All on social media so we can help blast that out and amplify it. We know that school nutrition staff are the on-the-ground people who are waking up early to prepare and serve meals, who are the most constant contact point for a lot of these kids over their school life. But nowadays, they're doing even more. They're going above and beyond by starting innovative breakfast programs that reach more kids. They're attending the K-12 Culinary Institute to up their game as chefs and introduce new healthy recipes. And you can't help but wonder if something like School Meals for All would provide more resources that can support staff retention and give them a chance to do new things like more scratch cooking. So I want to add that my school lunch hero this year is all of the central staff in different districts who, as they build back up their own staffs and cafeterias, are having to get off out of the office and back in the cafeteria to make sure these programs are run like they should. So we know that's a lot of added work to what you do already, and we appreciate you a lot. So School Lunch Hero Day, May 1st.
It's going to be a fun day, and I can't wait to see all the cool things that are going on through social media. And like Andrew said, if y'all see some things happening in your district or you're celebrating the school lunch staff or school meal staff within your districts, please share that with us. We'd love to highlight that in our next meeting in May. Okay. All right, for our main event today, I'd love to introduce our panel here as we are talking about making the connection between food insecurity and student well-being. And I will introduce our moderator. Emily Decker is the graduate intern for NCAH this semester, well, the last 2 semesters, and she will be graduating with her master's in social work next month. So we're really excited to have her as a part of this panel to share her knowledge with our 2 experts. So I'm going to pass it to you, Emily, to get us started.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's actually 9 days that I'll be graduating, not counting at all. I'm so grateful to be here this morning to be able to talk with Mina and Josh, who I'm going to have introduce themselves. If you guys would go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
My name is Josh Wells. I'm the community school coordinator. I'm employed by United Way, but I am located at Owen Middle School in the Shenandoah Valley, and this is my ninth school year at Owen Middle.
I am Mina Stotz. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I'm currently in private practice. I have a background in working with children who are at risk of having housing issues or food insecurity. I am a trauma specialist. So currently I'm in private practice, but I've done a lot of community mental health work. And currently I also am very involved in our son's PTA and solving food insecurity at our school is one of our big initiatives.
Sweet. Thanks, y'all. I'm excited to kind of jump into this topic of connecting the link between food insecurity and student well-being and no-cost school meals. I want to first acknowledge like this can be a really tough topic. This is something that we talk about all the time, so it's not quite as heavy maybe for us, but that doesn't mean it's not for all of you. So I want to encourage each of you to do what you need to do to take care of yourselves. You can turn off your camera, you can get up, move around, take a couple deep breaths, grab a cup of hot coffee, whatever that is. Just take a second to take care of yourselves if you need to. So let's go ahead and get started. And y'all are gonna see us get like maybe a little nerdy about this, step on some soapboxes. And no, we're not sorry about it at all. And we're gonna try not to go on too many little tangents, but let's kind of bebop back and forth with our questions. But this first one is going to be for both of you. What does food insecurity like actually look like in the lives of students and the families that you work with? Josh, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, it is not dissimilar to what we see with adults when adults are hungry. You are tired, you are distracted, unengaged. And so how that looks in the school, in the classroom, you have a student who hasn't eaten maybe since yesterday's lunch at school. So 7:45 in the morning, we're looking at science, and that student's probably going to fall asleep. Or maybe their emotions aren't regulated and they are acting out. And so both of those examples, the student is missing class time, is missing educational time. And then in a social network, if a student is getting a lunch or food that is different than everyone else and all the rest of their friends, then that's isolating. That's separating them from their social connection pieces. So that's could be very detrimental.
So true. And so true. I know when I'm hungry, you don't want to breathe at me wrong, right? It is that kind of like, I just can't get myself regulated. My body doesn't have the energy to do that. Mina, what about you? What have you noticed?
Yeah, so I'm going to draw from our PTA experience here, but we are always trying to recruit new parents and new families to volunteer, to be involved in our events. And we've found that our students who are hungry come from families who are hungry and they're just not able to engage. So, for example, last week we had STEM night, right? And we just didn't have as many kiddo. We try and do what we can, providing after school meals and after school coverage so that kids can stay if parents need to work because our events don't start till 5 or 6. But you do see those kids that are hungry, they are not showing up. And I can say, like, my son has friends who he wants to play with and wants to have play dates with, but these parents don't always have the capacity to hang out or do play dates because food and hunger and solving their hunger issues in their home are their main priority.
Mhm. Yeah. We want our kids to be engaged and our families to be engaged so like they can really lean into life and get the most out of it. Josh, this one's going to be for you. What are some ways that hunger shows up for students? You kind of touched on this a little bit already, but can you go into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that we see start out in the morning because my district is small, but it's expansive. And so some of our buses start running about 5:30 in the morning. School starts at 7:45. So even with the school breakfast, which is great, that doesn't mean that they've had enough nutrition for the past 24 hours. And so you're seeing a lot of sleeping first thing in the morning, a lot of inability to focus, not connecting, not following. Maybe they're trying, but they're distracted because they're hungry. And you have the physiological response to being hungry in your body. And so as a young person, that's going to be very distracting. They're not going to be able to focus on what's going on in the classroom. They're responding to their body. And as young people, a lot of what they have is within themselves. That's their own agency. And so they're responding to what they're feeling inside. And so if that's hunger, they're not watching the board. That can also lead into the stigma of not having food and the access to having food. So if you're part of that group that maybe gets food sent home on the weekends, that's a stigma. That's a thing that maybe your friends don't have. So why don't they have it? Why am I not the same? What's different about me? What's different about that other student? Why don't they have the same things that I have? So it just kind of creates a weird division and uncertainty and misunderstanding about why a student might take extra food home on the weekend. It's because they don't have food at home on the weekends, and that the school is helping with that. It's not that kid is just taking more stuff. So the misunderstanding between their peers can also lead to confusion and saying things that aren't the kindest. So that definitely locks into some of the social aspects of food access.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I know that the no-cost school meals can really help with that because it's open to everybody, right? There's not going to be a designated meal that individualizes a person and makes them stick out, because I know being a kid these days, even when I was a child, like it's hard. It's hard to kind of find your way, and having that one extra thing that really singles you out is just another impact on social life, which is incredibly important for students' mental health and development as well. And that's kind of one of the benefits of having no-cost school meals in our schools. And that, like, it feels like it's a right now problem. And I know as mental health professionals, we're kind of taught to see that a right now issue, how that can look later on in life, because it doesn't necessarily end right now. And so, Mina, can you speak to how the experience of childhood food insecurity can appear later on in somebody's life?
Yeah, so kind of in a pure clinical sense, we see people who've grown up with food insecurity have an increased rate of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and trauma. We see an increase in substance abuse, nicotine use, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts and actions in adults as well. So obviously, these conditions will decrease, or plus a decrease, as Josh had talked about, in academic performance throughout like these kids' careers in K through 12. So these lead to fewer positive employment outcomes, which we can hinder whether a person can afford or access like appropriate mental health services when they're an adult or for their children. And then I always like to bring in, so big thing that I do with my clients is talking about generational trauma, which is like inherited beliefs, values, and behaviors that we get from our parents, which they got from their parents sometimes, and so on and so forth. Um, and so we do see adults who have children pass along um, their values and beliefs around food to their children. So that those values really shape how you eat, shop, and feed yourself and your family. So we see people who engage in this themselves, but also are teaching their children that food is comfort. So we see binge eating disorders. Sometimes we see disordered eating or overeating. This also coincides with anxiety disorders. Food is scarce, so we have fear of not having enough food. So we have a lot of trauma around that. And so we're hoarding food or we're not eating as much. But we actually maybe we do have access to enough food. We see people with survivor's guilt. A lot of my clients currently are one or two steps removed from food insecurity, poverty. And hunger. And so they feel bad sometimes, like being able to go to Trader Joe's and buying all these really great foods for themselves when their parents or maybe their grandparents don't or didn't have that ability to do so. So yeah, so as adults, we see a lot of stress, we see a lot of anxiety, and we see a lot of emotional distress.
Yeah. And something like personal to me, one of the things that really got me into this work is I care a lot about people who struggle with eating disorders and food insecurity, seeing the correlation between childhood food insecurity and the increased outcomes of developing an eating disorder later in life, I was like, oh, advocating for no-cost school meals is also eating disorder prevention. It's mental health support. And it's really important for us to be able to see that it's not just a right now problem. It is an issue that can occur and really impact the way that someone develops and grows and the adult that they become. And that can, trickle out into our society and the people that we're around. Um, and I'm curious, Josh, like in our previous conversations, you've mentioned that your school nutrition staff has worked to ensure students receive meals regardless of pay. And I know I mentioned earlier, like that can really decrease the stigma. But I'm curious if you've noticed a difference in your students or even in your students' families or within among their caretakers after your school has implemented no-cost school meals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in having this conversation, the kind of the lead up for this panel today, we talked about my experience at Owen has been we've had really great cafeteria staff that has ensured that even before we had the school meals for all, that there wasn't such a drastic difference between the students who were on free and reduced lunch and the ones who were not. You hear some horror stories about the free and reduced lunch being, a cheese sandwich just kind of put on a piece of paper and handed to the kid. And so that was a separation and a stigma that, some people have gone through in dealing with the free and reduced lunches. We didn't have that in my experience in the time that I've been there. I can't speak for all the time that's happened, but it's definitely, we've seen the impacts of the free meals for all a lot in our adults and our caregivers, of seeing that as just a relief of we don't have to worry about that additional charge for our school and that additional bill. In the past, before we had this, you would kind of rack up your debt, your student debt for eating lunch. We've had donors and people who have helped out families cover that because, we require our students to go to school. Absolutely amazing public education, but then we don't also provide for the food while they're there. And so that is an additional cost that our families really struggle with sometimes, whether it's the paying for the food at school or having to pack lunch. And so without this, or without having to stress about that, that allows for other focus. That allows for those adults to use some of those funds in ways that they don't have to worry about, do I pay the light bill or buy food? You have these pieces that have also added to the trust that our school and our families have, because not only do we have the free meals for all, Owen is specifically very food friendly, very much with the potlucks and food gatherings and coming together as a community around food. And so by having that additional support from the school, the families are able to say, okay, that's a help. Could you also help with this maybe? Can we ask you about this other side of needs that we have as a family that the school has already addressed the food thing? Maybe the school can help out with other things. And we absolutely can. And it really relies on those families and those adults to getting past their stigma, like Mina said, of like maybe their experiences of food were connected. And so now they have children who are not having to deal with some of those same stigmas and challenges with food. And so that lets the parents know, okay, I don't have to worry about that. Now I really need to focus on this. Well, we got school people who helped out with this thing. Would the school people help out with this other need that my family has? And it's been a really great development of how much our families feel comfortable coming to the school, being at the school, which leads to better student outcomes. I mean, the research shows that the more engaged positively, that's a big thing, more positively engaged that our families are, then our test results and our academic scores reflect that positive engagement. And so with the school being a resource in that way for our families, it's opened the door for our families to trust us with other things that we can help them out with.
I love that word trust. I think that is like a foundational piece to being a human, is being able to have a place where you feel safe enough that you can allow either the person or the organization to hold you in times of difficulty. And the fact that the school can provide that just by providing, no cost school meals is huge, because I think we often talk about the impact it has on the kids, right? Because that's incredibly important. And it's a trickle effect because it does impact the caregivers and the parents. And just like that relief of just a little bit less stress can be really huge just in the aspect of a family and the family system. And I like, thank you so much for bringing that up, Josh, because I think that's a piece that we need to talk more about, because the parents are the ones in charge. And I think right now, just stress levels are really high for a multitude of different reasons, and people are struggling. And having this assuredness that my child is going to get fed while they're away from me in the care of the school system is a huge impact on the whole family, not just the individuals. And I think that, that plays into the mental health of the children, but also plays into the mental health of the parents and the caregivers, but then the mental health of the family unit as well. And Mina, you've touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about how food, like how this really shows up in people, like maybe talking about Maslow's a little bit. Um,
I'm gonna nerd
yeah,
out a little bit. Is that what you're asking
get
me to
it, girl.
do right now? Okay.
Yes.
You can all Google this. I won't go too deep into it. But yes, so before I dive into all of my other part, I want to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and some people might be familiar with it. But essentially, it's this idea that in order for us to do well in school, for us to have good self-esteem, for us to like have healthy relationships, we need to have our basic needs met. And it's a triangle, and at the bottom of the triangle, right, are your basic needs, so food, shelter, clothing, etc., and safety. So I just wanted to kind of lay that framework as I go into the rest of what I wanted to talk about. But right, so like we have these kids and these families who are not able to get their basic needs met. So they're not really able to maybe unpack, some of the parents aren't able to unpack their past trauma sometimes, or appropriately address their mental health needs. Um, so when you are hungry, how does that show up in families in terms of mental health? So we see in families an increase in intimate partner violence, child abuse, parental substance abuse, disordered eating, and more underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, or untreated mental health disorders within families. And so kids are sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they're at school, they're hungry, they're the odd duck out. They feel the stigma there, and then they're going home, and because parents are unable to meet their basic needs, they're not able to maybe nurture their children or connect with their children as they normally would. So I think from a family system standpoint, it's also important to just sort of frame that like these kids are struggling at school and at home and might not be able to find safety or feel safe. And our little ones, especially in elementary school, what are they trying to learn or figure out about the world? Who are the helpers? Who's safe? What's safe? Am I good? Am I worthy? And these are all really important developmental stages that if we don't work through, there's like a whole other model, which you will all be here for another hour if I go into that. A model of developmental stages for kiddos and into adulthood that we see kids having difficulty in. Um, so, so that's an important, couple important points there. Um, So when we see children not get their basic needs met, we also see an increase in trauma, depression, anxiety. They have a really hard time regulating their emotions and impulses, and like Josh said, like appropriately engaging in class. Um, Sometimes we see that hunger issues and mental health or behavioral health disorders get confused, right? So you see people who are, or see kiddos that maybe are misdiagnosed with ADHD or autism or oppositional defiant disorder, or anxiety because they just like can't, they are so hungry, they're not able to focus. So we see sometimes a misdiagnosis in children. We also see that kids that are diagnosed with ADHD, autism, oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety, trauma, other disorders, they're not really able to engage in mental health treatment. Like just like they're not really able to engage in classrooms, they're not really able to engage in mental health treatment. It's really difficult to find good interventions for them because hunger trumps what we call neuroplasticity, which is like the ability to make new pathways in your brain to like create new coping skills or like different ways of like handling things or understanding situations. Um, yeah, so I think these are like very important like nuances to also take into to account when it comes to children and mental health and families and mental health.
And I'm wondering if we could like go ahead and talk about you touched on it earlier, the generational piece of that,
Yes.
and how that kind of carries on. If you could touch a little bit more on that.
Sure, yeah. So these kids have so much that is being, there's just so many nuances with working with hungry kiddos. And one of them is the generational trauma piece where their parents might, they might not want people, they probably don't want people to know that their cupboards are bare and their refrigerator is empty. Um, and they grew up also being the odd one out or stigmatized, maybe teased and bullied. And so they might not encourage their children to make friendships. These kids don't always know how to engage in friendships. Um, these children sometimes bully instead of nurturing, like create connections. And so we see a perpetuation of pushing people away, and we know that isolation also makes mental health harder to treat and exacerbate symptoms. So yeah, so I think we see that too of like their values around not being hungry at school that they're being taught is that it's bad, it's shameful. What we are is shameful, and so therefore you need to stay safe or you need to not, maybe you need to be in a bubble or push people away. So we do see that as well.
Yeah. And connection is so important. And I like this kind of talk about like enoughness, right? It's whether that's an intrinsic, am I enough, or actually getting enough food, because as you mentioned, like our brain needs food in order to function and to be able to connect with one another and have those nurturing friendships and moments in life where, we're just human to human. And part of that is getting enough food. If you're not getting enough food, it doesn't really matter what type of food you're getting. But at the end of the day, we just need enough food, especially our kids. And talking about like improving our mental health, right? And improving access to food through our schools and the aspect of community. Josh, you mentioned earlier, like your potlucks and stuff that y'all's school does. And you've created those opportunities like family meal nights at school that you've talked with me about before. And I'm curious, like how does sharing meals build that trust and connection and overall well-being for students and their families?
Yeah, so just a little brief about the family meal nights. We try to do them as often as we can on Thursdays. So we have a consistent kind of schedule from Thursdays on from 5 to 6:30. We pair with local caterers, so it's local food, and It's just a free meal for any family K through 12. We have games, we have music, we pay teachers to stick around if there are any academic needs that are needed. Um, but it's a really awesome way for our families to connect with the school in a way that most people have never experienced. A lot of times our adults are only called to the school on negative times, and for things that aren't the most positive, unfortunately. So these nights create a really awesome way for our families to connect with each other, and with teachers in a different way. It's not a charity. It's not a soup kitchen-esque. It's a fun, engaged, casual atmosphere. And it doesn't matter what your home life situation is. You could have two parents who are still together and making plenty of money, but they don't want to cook dinner for a family of 5 on a Thursday. Come through. It doesn't have to be a separation of us and them. And so our families, they're very closely linked in ways that they don't realize because their kids are in the same classes. So you've got two kids who are in the same science class. The families could be in enormously different socioeconomic categories, but they have a connection that they didn't realize until they come to one of these dinner nights and the kids are hanging out. The parents are like, okay, so that one belongs to you. That one belongs to you. Okay, so friendships are made, connections are made. People live next to each other. They just don't know it because we move in different circles all the time. We have different churches. We have different organizations that we're connected to, but all of our kids go to schools. And so utilizing the school itself as a hub for those gathering places, those safeties, like safety and food are very, very closely linked in the things that we need for our own survival and our own mental health. And so with those nights, the school building is safe. The school building has food. The school building has connection. And so by doing all these different things, we've seen over the past few years that our families rely on our school for a lot of things that in the history of that building, it's the same building that was built in 1955. So a lot of history lives in that building. And so, as Mina said, the generational aspects of grandma might have gone to that building and did not have a good time because people who were in that building or in things that happened in that building weren't great. And so the generation of like, well, we don't trust that building. We don't trust that school. We don't trust, all these different things. And by simple as having some food, breaking bread together, sitting next to each other, not asking our parents to do anything, just to come and be. And so we've absolutely seen that connection and that safety and that trust network build and build, because our school building is not just a place where our parents and adults send their kids. It's a place that they can also come to, and we invite them and we encourage them to be there as well.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. That's so great. I love hearing that. And I think this really played out, especially during Hurricane Helene. I'm in the Western corridor of the state as well as Josh, and we had that unique experience of experiencing Helene when, a lot of us didn't have access to food. And schools kind of became a hub. And I know that the school you're at is supplied with CEP. And I'm curious if that kind of infrastructure that was already in place, if that helped the school respond to Helene, or if you noticed anything about that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen the ways that I've been at that school for the last 9 years, and I've seen the way that things have gone about the feelings about the school building. And we were hit really hard. And surprisingly, our school buildings remained fairly untouched. And so our own community deeply relied on those buildings and those areas because it had playgrounds, and you can go and have a safe place for our kids to interact and engage because we don't have power, we don't have water, we can't connect to each other. So we absolutely relied on the school buildings, and it's the trust of, I can go to school and get food like that. I know that that's a thing that my school does. So I know there's resources there. And that impact on our community, even with people who didn't have children, they knew that school building can be trusted.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's such a great resource for all of us during that time. I know people are incredibly grateful to Owen for being that kind of hub. And kind of to like close us out, I have one last question. And it's for both of you. If there's one thing that you want people to understand about the connection between food access and student well-being or family well-being, and one action, so it's a two-part question, so bear with me, and one action that could help move this work forward, what do you think that would be? And whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. So I think that food access really lays the groundwork for like growing healthy adults who can impact our communities in positive ways. So I think the more that and this is something that I'm really trying to do more of, and the more we spread the word and get people talking about the benefits of providing low cost, no cost meals to kiddos, the better. We give kids and families the opportunity to heal, and our family units are our first introductions to like attachment, right? To relationships. And so if we can help these families heal by getting their basic needs met, we can help generations upon generations coming from those parents and those families to be able to engage in our communities in really great ways. Um, so like I was saying, I think spreading the word, being really vocal, and getting this message to local legislators is kind of what I've personally been doing, and what I hope others could do as well.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Our kids, yes, but all people deserve access to good food. Hard stop. And I'm not meaning good food as in like fancy food. I mean like good quality food. So pay attention to the people who are on the ballots. Listen to how they speak about basic needs, basic resources, how they speak about children. Pay close attention to the things that they say and how they say them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm like just so grateful to have the space to be able to have these kind of conversations because
Yes.
we don't have them enough and they're so incredibly important. And it is really about getting needs met. First and foremost, we need enough food to be able to function and connect and build trust with one another and within life in order to lead healthy, thriving lives. And getting enough food through schools is one way of doing that. And this group that's why we're here. And that's why we're here and why we're fighting for this is because what we're doing now impacts who and what adults we're going to have later. And children deserve to eat. That's also a full stop as well. And so I'm just incredibly grateful to have this conversation. Alicia, I don't know if we have time for any kind of questions or if anybody has any, but
We can take 1 minute if anybody has any questions. We've been trying to monitor the chat as we've been going and answering what we could. But if anybody has a question for our speakers, please feel free to come off mute or throw it in the chat really quickly. There was one question in the chat, Josh. Mary Beth is also in the western part of the state, and she says her grandson has an altered schedule and has an IEP, but feels that they may not be getting what they should. Who would you recommend for her to contact?
I would go first to the school social worker, because I think that would be their first line of contact for if there's any extra IEP 504 needs that maybe are external to the building. I would start with the school social worker there, and see if the conversations could be had about what's not being met. And then if there are maybe resources that the school can't provide, but that they know of, then school social workers should be that point of contact for where those resources are and how to get connected with them.
So I'm just going to jump in real quick. There are IEP advocates. Usually I mean, there are IEP advocates. They're not tied to the school district, but you could always Google who is in your county. That would be an IEP advocate as well. They can come to meetings and things like that with you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm seeing no other questions in the chat. Thank y'all so much for this great conversation. I think we've heard a lot of really cool things. People have loved hearing about the family nights and ways that districts are bringing folks together and kind of taking the stigma away. And I think that, you know, School Meals for All can do the same thing for our children, just kids breaking bread together, being social, enjoying their lunchtime, and taking the stigma around whether I have something to pay for lunch or not, things that aren't children problems. Those are adult problems. So being able to take that away from them really makes a difference. So thank y'all so much for engaging in this conversation with us. And if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to continue putting those in the chat and we can answer them as we go. But want to move into our updates and wanted to see if anyone has any updates going on in your neck of the woods, anything coming up for your organizations or things that the group needs to think about in networking. Feel free to drop anything in the chat or come off mute. This also goes for any new resources that you would like to share with the group. Anything is welcome.
I can come off mute for a second. The Center for Black Health and Equity has launched its Champion Starter Kit. It can be accessed on the center's website for downloading, and I will put that link in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Tiara. And within this toolkit, there's resources like one-pagers and things like that. What else is included in that?
One-pagers. Oh, go ahead, Kayla. I'm sorry.
No, I was just tag teaming to just say examples of ways to share your story, a summary or snapshot of the history of the coalition, some talking points on some great topics to support advocacy across the state. Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. Any others? All right, so upcoming meetings for the coalition specifically, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, May 27th at 11 o'clock, same time, same place. We'll be thinking about some summer programs because hunger doesn't stop for the summer when school is out. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then in June, we will meet on the 24th at 11 a.m. as well. And registration for both of those meetings are on the School Meals website at this link or QR code. And Katie has dropped that link in the chat. And I'll pass it to Kayla to talk about community advocacy meetings.
Yes, so our next community advocacy meeting will be May 5th and then the following one on June 2nd, because remember, the community advocacy meetings are every first Tuesday of the month from 6 to 7 p.m. Really excited for you guys to continue to join us or join us for the first time. It's a really great opportunity to just stay connected with the community, stay in the know, and tap into various workshops and supports that we offer. Earlier this month, we had Elevating Our Stories with Elevator Pitch workshop, and next month we'll do a storytelling workshop. So feel free to join us, and excited to continue to grow this movement together.
Awesome. Hope to see y'all there. As we close out, if you would humor us and in the chat, add one thing that you're taking away from today's meeting, whether it be something that you learned from our speakers, someone in the chat that you would like to connect with, or a new thing that may spark joy that you've seen others share.
Alicia, also in the chat, Bellen Rogers put a link for the upcoming March for Public Education in Raleigh. Just wanted to make everybody aware that that is in there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Bellen. Let's see. Everything's coming so fast. I'm trying to read. So Simone says general social effect of food insecurity is one thing she loved. I agree. Things that are happening in schools are not just happening right now, but it's going to affect our adults later on and our future workforce for North Carolina. Everything is completely linked. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody joining us today, and we hope you are taking away some great talking points and things to think about within your own communities. If you haven't already followed us on social media, please feel free to do that. These are our social channels. We're just about everywhere you can be, so feel free to tag us and stay connected. And Mina and Josh have both put their emails in the chat if you'd like to connect with them, and we'll be sure to share those as well in the follow-up email. But thanks for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
All right. Have a great one, everyone.
Have a good one.